This is the Depth Mystic Community Podcast, episode 39. So, Jungian Depth Mystic Zach Tolan, what's on the menu for episode 39? Well, I think we have to look at episode 38 and realize that the subject matter of that episode was very intense. The subject matter was called Kenosis. It's the idea of total emptying of oneself in a kind of surrender to a cause or a purpose. We talked about how in Christian tradition, that kind of total surrendering is thought to be necessary to succeed at the purpose. And that I was doing so myself in a new way, which is surrendering myself to becoming an artist. That's true. So where does the podcast go here if you're changing the focus of most of your passion and energy to this video game you're working on? Well, the podcast is here to stay. I think you and I have come to an agreement on that point. So what do we talk about this week after the full kenosis, the emptying, and the transition into a whole nother zone of effort? Well, you tell me. I mean, you are the Jungian depth mystic. If anybody is equipped to help us answer a question like that, it would be you. There's a quote that comes to mind from Zen Buddhism. After ecstasy, the laundry. After periods of peak intensity, consciousness needs to maintain an awareness of the ebb and flow of everything. Just because you've totally emptied yourself like Jesus Christ on the cross. In Zen Buddhism, the next week, you have to do the laundry. And so that's the thing that comes to mind. I like that. And it definitely fits our situation this week. But what else should we talk about? How about we talk about the community? One of the tremendous advantages of cleverly calling this the community podcast is that we flatter ourselves into believing that there's a community out there. There's like a community that's relying on this podcast, even if our subject matter is little more than doing the laundry. And so for the sake of the community, for continuity, for persistence, which is a kind of heroism unto itself, there will be an episode 39. And you're listening to it. But what are we doing? The laundry? Well, kind of. But we have a community to serve. And I guess the subject of this podcast is depth mysticism. We're serving the depth mystic community. So one reliable way to approach the problem is to ask, what is depth mysticism? This is our subject matter, and we're here to cover it. But what is it? Well, for me, I've said before, if you read the essay called Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson, he gives an expression of what it's like to sort of just stand alone, even when nobody else is in your psychic space. And my mystical experience that I had starting in 1997 and going through 2018 gave me a true depth foundation in just being myself. Even if there's no real conversation being had with other people, I can feel confident that I am more attuned to reality than two non-mystics in their conversations. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of weird because people accuse mystics, of maybe being too mystical, which is to say they're not in reality. But you're saying that you think the average two people who meet on a bus or something, who have a conversation, are actually less in tune with reality than you are as one person who's had a mystical experience. And moreover, you're on disability for mental illness. And I guess that is the core principle of the depth mystic worldview, is that, like Ralph Waldo Emerson, we believe that there are people who have such a clear view of the nature of reality that even if no one else agrees with them, they can stand by that view and flourish in that view. We could call it having an umbilical cord to reality. An umbilical cord to reality. Okay. It's as if you have a primal connection to reality, even if you don't have a squad of cheerleaders confirming that connection. And so basically, whatever we want to choose for our subject matter, that will probably be in a closer proximity to reality, despite the fact that we are only one person far removed from society, then most people in society will have, even if surrounded by large groups of yes men or adoring and confirming numbers of people. I guess that does constitute a kind of subject matter. On the one hand, we sort of covered that before, but on the other hand, any given week could itself be a perfect instance of some kind of subject matter that we might have covered in the abstract, but insofar as it rears its head in real life, it's perfectly okay to cover that stuff. But is there any extra spice that we can add? I'd like to add some pepper, maybe, to make it a little more depth mystical. You know, is there anything to say about Carl Jung, the Yoda of depth mysticism? Any fancy quotes that we can use to make our food taste a little bit better this week? I don't know. I'm just doing the laundry. We're just doing the weekly podcast episode. But yeah, Carl Jung, we talked about him before. He's a legend. He's the GOAT. He's the greatest depth mystic of all time. And he doubles as like a doctor and a scientist and essayist and scholar. Well, what about today? Where's the spirit of Carl Jung? Where is the living energy? Where is the living force today? I guess other than in the Depth Mystic Community podcast. If you look out into the rest of the world, you know, do you see any other depth mystic energy on the internet, for example? Well, yeah, I mean, I've talked about Peter Kingsley, but let's acknowledge him and then try to ask, so what other depth mystic energy is out there right now? I will give credit to, there's one Facebook group called Carl Jung Advanced Individuation, which was started by a guy who I will give credit for being like a true Jungian. I think he might be loath to call himself a mystic in any fashion. Jungians often wear the mantle of scientist, of being rational and scientific. And he probably would prefer that. But anyway, the guy who started that, you know, he has good energy. So I definitely give credit to that. But it is kind of rare. And there's a woman who does a podcast called Speaking of Jung, speaking of Carl Jung, you know, and she just interviews a bunch of Jungian analysts. And she starts every episode with like 2 or 3 paragraphs worth of credentials and curriculum vitae of the people she's interviewing, because there is still a need in the Jungian circles to prove that you have substance. I think it's because whenever you individuate as a Jungian, you are diving into what the alchemists would call the filth. And that makes you seem, from the point of view of society, like you're just a pig swimming in shit or something. It's a low-ranking thing in society to undergo this individuation process. And so maybe that kind of explains why there's still a strong need among Jungians to list their credentials and to build walled gardens, you might say, of their craft. Because it would take like a true Jedi master, a true Taoist master, to understand everything Jung did and then just go straight into the marketplace where, you know, the lowlifes and the dirt bags, just the merchants who are just sort of thinking about how to make some money or something, to just go straight there and sell your stuff and to succeed in the marketplace of raw reality without any kind of walled garden, without any kind of mechanism for stacking up credentials like, oh, he studied in Zurich and he did the thing with the Jungian thing and he's now a sophisticated person because of all these things. But anyway, so she lists all those things and I understand it, but it's definitely, I don't have anything to list. So, like, if I was a guest on her podcast, she'd literally just have to take my word for it. And I guess there's a thing called Depth Psychology Alliance. And I sometimes get emails from them saying they have a course here or a lecture here. Overall, yeah, the depth mystic energy in this world currently, that's why we're here. That's why the Depth Mystic Community Podcast is here. It's so that there will be more depth mystic energy. And fortunately, we are totally in control of the energy that we ourselves are putting into the world here at the Depth Mystic Community Podcast. We can do anything we want with the podcast and do our best to take a stand. Like Neo in The Matrix. He beats Agent Smith in a fair fight in the train station, and then Agent Smith kills him in a totally unfair fight by just warping into a totally new person right next to the phone, and then shoots him full of holes. That's not fair. Anyway, Trinity won't stand for it, and she gives him a nice kiss, and then he wakes up resurrected. The holes are gone, and now he's standing. He's the one. He's the standing one. And that's what we're doing. That's our job. Until such time as people rally to our cause, we will stand here alone, representing depth mysticism, putting the energy into the world. Hurrah, Jungian depth mystic Zach Tolan. I guess it's just nobody understands this shit. Do you think it's just too deep? This philosophy is too deep for people to even understand? I think so. We could say there's two basic reasons. There's the motivation and then there's the ability. The reasons why people do or do not do things is they need the ability and they need the motivation. And certainly to do Jungian individuation, it helps if you have an extraordinary ability. If you're blessed with some kind of natural gift of insight, or as a philosopher, anything that just sets you sort of supernaturally in a way above the rest. It's just your gift comes so naturally to you that it becomes sort of second nature to you that this gift is present in your life, and you don't even stop and think about it in a normal egoic way. Like for most people who are entering into society trying to climb the ladder or make achievements, their level of ability is comparable to many of the others who are also competing. And so they have to invest tons of time and energy into achieving a position that compares favorably to all the people who are there in competition with. But I think if you have a totally natural gift that comes effortlessly to you and transcends almost the entire ladder that other people are even trying to climb. It's like for whatever reason, you can just see the whole ladder right from the beginning and you climb a whole completely different ladder with your mind. The point is, if you have an exceptional type of brilliance or talent, this might be what's required for hardcore Jungian individuation. Because individuation is about becoming yourself. It's about transferring social credentials from society onto the thing that you're actually good at. And like being your own castle, your own oasis in the desert. And maybe you have to have such a huge talent in order to understand what Jung was even talking about ultimately. So that would be the ability. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that there are many people who have the ability, but then there is the motivation category. Because the whole idea of Jungian individuation is to go away from society, it tends to go against all of the social instincts, all of the monkey-brained instincts that people have. The process of individuation goes against that. And so you need that much motivation in order to withstand the shame and the sadness that you'll feel at the loss of all the community. And the way to start caring more about true reality than about what society thinks The way to do that is through profound suffering. So to finally get the motivation you need, you have to suffer tremendously. And so I think Jungian individuation will happen to people who are simultaneously profoundly gifted in a way that makes the things that other people in that same zone struggle to do look easy. And you also have to have really profound suffering, something that alienates you sort of forcibly from society. If you combine those two, now you get to the depths, the most extreme depths of the human psychic condition. And that's where a depth mystic is born. That, and also you have to be a massive introvert for the most part. The other key character trait in all of my depth mystic heroes are they're massive introverts. An inborn personality trait that occurs in a certain percentage of the population. But without that trait, I have found few, maybe none, of individuals who achieve this depth mystic insight. Okay, cool. Oh, and also, how's the video game development going? Yeah, that's a whole other thing. That feels like diving into the depths all over again. Trying to figure out how the video game can be crafted as what I call the child of the mystic vision. How to take a mystic vision and turn it into a video game. The challenge is to do that, to enter into that psychic space and become a real artist. I won't pretend that it's easy. So I don't even know if it is the kind of subject matter we should actually review regularly on the DMCP, because this is for like the depth mystic community, and people making art might want to find their own communities and talk amongst themselves about that subject matter. Okay, I was just asking. I'm glad that you're going strong. So, any other laundry you feel like you want to mention? Well, depth mystic subject matter covers everything. Depth mysticism is about reality. And so, in a way, we could literally talk about anything and would probably have some relevance to the total subject matter. But that said, I think we've got an episode on our hands. Sounds good to me, Jungian Depth Mystic Zach Tolan. That's episode 39. We hope you liked it. Join our Facebook group or our Discord server. Discord is what young people obsess over, so I have one. Facebook is what old people obsess over, so I have one. And we'll see you next week.